Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us here on the program where we cover the most interesting live trials and legal stories in the news today. Let's get started. Okay, so as the judge is just giving this kind of roadmap to the jury before we even hear the openings from the state and the defense, let's get some perspective here. Joining me once again on this Monday morning is retired LAPD Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. Cheryl, good morning to you. Great to see you. I'm glad to have you here for this incredible trial. What are we expecting today? I mean, this is a whole different kind of ball game for Mr. Loyd than it was during the guilt or not guilty phase. What do you expect today?
Well, I guess we'll have to see whether or not the jury believed any of the cockamamie stories that he put forth in his defense as to, how this thing happened and what a victim he was, and everybody's picking on poor Mr. Loyd. We'll see if the defense was able to convince the jury to buy into that version of their story.
A lot of people are watching this. A lot of people have a fight in this, not a fight in this, but a lot of people are looking at this trial for a number of different reasons. And you have to imagine, Cheryl, one of those groups is law enforcement, because we can't forget that Mr. Loyd is going to be facing a separate trial for the murder of Officer Deborah Clayton outside of that Walmart, that shooting that took place. What do you think law enforcement, the law enforcement community, is thinking about this part of the case?
Being in law enforcement myself, I would imagine that they're probably not too wrapped up in, what happens with this, because at the end of the day, the officers would want justice for their fallen comrade, if you will. And so whatever happens here is not going to be sufficient enough to make them think, well, then we can kind of give him a minimal sentence on the law enforcement death because, he was given death already. I mean, you could only kill him once, right? But the fact of the matter is that officer's life mattered. And so, they're waiting to see, okay, let's play ball. Let's see what we're going to get for this life.
And they've also come under question in this case because of the way his arrest happened. There's a big thing that they were too aggressive in his arrest, so much so that they actually blinded him in one eye. What do you think about that aspect of this case?
Well, I don't know if it's going to be a big deal in this case, but it certainly could be problematic in the next case, because at the end of the day, listen, officers are not, you're not allowed to mete out justice when you take someone into custody. And I understand that tensions were high and, emotions were high, but you take a person into custody and then you let the system do what it is that it's supposed to do. And so, when you hear that officers are the reason now that Mr. Loyd has lost an eye, that too could be a mitigating factor.
Well, we'll see if that actually is introduced. First up, as you can see, the state has begun their opening statement in the sentencing phase. Let's go live. All right, so we're hearing the defense trying to make a case right now to literally save the life of Markeith Loyd. Cheryl, you've heard the state. You're now hearing the defense. What are your thoughts?
I've got nothing for Mr. Loyd. Listen, Cry Me a River. It's about choices at the end of the day. It's about choices. And unfortunately, Mr. Loyd chose to be aggressive. He chose to not be a productive member of society. He chose to get involved in criminality. And so there are consequences when you don't make appropriate choices. And here we are.
Well, I have to tell you, even though this jury came forward and said we will be impartial when it comes to the death penalty phase, they've seen this man day in and day out. They saw him take the stand. It's maybe easier said than done to ultimately recommend the death penalty. Having said that, here are some of the aggravating factors that they can consider when it comes to Sade Dixon. One, Loyd was on probation at the time of the killing. And number two, he has been previously convicted of a felony, battery of an officer, in 1998. The jury will also be able to consider the killing of Sade Dixon and the circumstances surrounding that. When it comes to the killing of Sade's unborn child, there are three aggravating factors, two of the ones I just mentioned, but also an additional one that the child was under 12 years old. These are all the aggravating factors that they can consider, and they have to weigh that against any mitigating factors presented by the defense. I think now's a great opportunity to take a break. When we come back, we'll be live. Stay tuned.